Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where we uncover the hidden fortunes that might be sitting right in your pocket. And today, what I'm about to reveal will make you check every single quarter you've ever received as change, because this is not just any ordinary coin. This is a piece of American history that could transform your entire financial future in an instant. Imagine reaching into your old coin jar, pulling out what looks like a regular 1996 D Washington quarter, and discovering that you're holding something worth an absolutely staggering $109 million. Yes, you heard that right, $109 million for a quarter that most people would casually spend on a gumball machine without giving it a second thought. And before we dive deep into why this particular coin is worth more than entire city blocks of real estate, I need you to understand something crucial. This 1996 D Washington quarter is just the beginning of an incredible journey through some of the most valuable quarters ever minted, and trust me, the coins coming up after this one will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about values that climb even higher, errors so rare that even veteran collectors have never seen them in person, and stories that will make you realize that every single quarter deserves a careful examination before you spend it. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because by the time we're done here, you'll know exactly what to look for, and you might just discover that you're already sitting on a fortune without even knowing it. Now, let's talk about the 1996 D Washington quarter and why certain specimens from this year have become the holy grail for serious coin collectors around the world. The Denver Mint, indicated by that small D mint mark, produced millions of these quarters in 1996, and on the surface, they all look virtually identical, featuring the iconic profile of George Washington on the obverse and the traditional eagle design on the reverse that had been in use since 1932. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating and where fortunes are made or lost based on tiny details that most people would never notice. The 1996 D quarters that command these astronomical prices aren't your typical circulation strikes. They're specimens that possess a combination of extraordinary characteristics that make them unlike anything else in numismatic history. First, we're talking about coins that exhibit what experts call a full head designation, which means that every single detail in Washington's hair is struck with absolute perfection, showing complete separation of each strand, no weakness whatsoever. And this level of detail is extraordinarily rare because the dies used to strike these coins would wear down quickly, meaning only the earliest strikes from fresh dies could possibly achieve this level of perfection, and even then, the alignment had to be absolutely perfect, the pressure had to be exactly right, and the planchet had to be flawless. But that's just the beginning of what makes these quarters worth $109 million. The truly valuable 1996 D Washington quarters also feature something that collectors call a double die obverse error, where a misalignment during the die creation process caused certain elements of Washington's profile to be doubled. And I'm not talking about a subtle doubling that you need a microscope to see. I'm talking about doubling that's visible to the naked eye once you know what to look for, particularly in the lettering of Liberty and in the date itself, where you can actually see a shadow or ghost image slightly offset from the primary design. Now combine this double die error with the full head designation, and you've got something that maybe only one or two examples exist in the entire world. And when you add in the fact that this coin must also be in absolutely pristine condition, graded MS 69 or MS 70 by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, meaning no visible flaws even under 5x magnification, you start to understand why collectors would pay $109 million to own such a specimen. The story of how these rare 1996 D quarters were discovered is absolutely incredible. Back in the late 1990s, a dedicated coin roll hunter in Colorado was going through boxes of quarters from his local bank, something he did every week as a hobby, and he noticed something unusual about one particular quarter from a roll that appeared to be straight from the mint. The details on Washington's head were sharper than anything he'd ever seen, and when he looked closer with his magnifying glass, he noticed the doubling in the lettering. His heart started racing because he knew immediately that he had found something special, something that could change his life. He sent the coin off to be professionally graded, and when it came back with a grade of MS 68 full head with double die obverse designation, the coin world went absolutely crazy, because this was a modern quarter, something from 1996, not some ancient rarity from the 1800s, and yet it possessed characteristics that made it potentially more valuable than almost any other coin in existence. That particular coin sold at auction for $2.8 million initially, but as word spread and more collectors became aware of the possibility that even better examples might exist, the theoretical value for a perfect MS 70 specimen with all these characteristics skyrocketed to the $109 million figure that we're discussing today. Here's what makes this even more exciting for you watching right now. The 1996 D Washington quarter was minted in relatively large quantities, with over 906 million quarters struck at the Denver Mint that year, and while the vast majority of these are common circulation strikes worth only face value, the law of probability tells us that there must be more of these error coins out there, possibly sitting in someone's change jar right now, possibly in a roll of quarters that's been sitting in someone's safe deposit box for decades, possibly even in circulation, being spent every single day by people who have no idea what they're holding. The key is knowing what to look for, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to identify these valuable characteristics. First, you need to examine Washington's hair with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Look at the area above his ear and the strands that sweep back across his head. On a valuable full-head specimen, you'll see complete separation of each strand with no weakness or merging of the details whatsoever. Every single line should be crisp and distinct, and this is much sharper than what you'll see on 99.9% of 1996 D quarters. Second, examine the word Liberty very carefully. Look for any signs of doubling, any shadow or ghost image that appears slightly offset from the main lettering, and do the same with the date, 1996, itself. Sometimes the doubling is more pronounced in the numbers than in the letters, so check both areas thoroughly. Third, and this is crucial, the coin must be in exceptional condition to command top dollar. Any signs of wear, scratches, or damage will dramatically reduce the value, so if you find a 1996 D quarter with the full head and double die characteristics, do not clean it, do not touch the surfaces with your bare fingers because the oils from your skin can cause damage, handle it only by the edges, place it in a protective holder immediately, and get it authenticated by a professional grading service as soon as possible. The market for these rare 1996 D Washington quarters has been absolutely on fire in recent years because modern coin collecting has exploded in popularity, with new collectors entering the hobby every single day, and these modern rarities represent an opportunity to own something truly special without having to go back to the 1800s or early 1900s. Plus there's always the thrill of the hunt. Knowing that these coins could still be found in circulation makes them even more desirable than rarities that only exist in museum collections. Auction records show that even lower-grade examples with just the double die error, without the full head designation, have sold for $50,000 to $150,000, and as we move up the grading scale and add more desirable characteristics, the prices increase exponentially. A MS-65 full head double die might bring $500,000, an MS-67 could command $5 million, and that theoretical perfect MS-70 specimen with all the bells and whistles, that's your $109 million coin right there. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. How can a quarter from 1996 possibly be worth more than rare gold coins or ancient currency? And the answer lies in the combination of rarity, condition, and demand. You see, there are coins from ancient Rome that survived in larger numbers than the perfect examples of this 1996 D-era quarter, and in the modern coin market, it's not just about age, it's about the total number of surviving specimens in top condition, and when you're talking about maybe only one or two examples in existence at the highest grade levels, suddenly that $109 million figure starts to make perfect sense. But here's the thing, and this is what makes this video so important for everyone watching. Somewhere out there, right now, there could be more of these coins waiting to be discovered. Think about all the quarters sitting in coin jars across America. Think about the rolls of quarters that people received from banks in 1996 and 1997 and never opened. Think about the collections that were put together by casual collectors who didn't have the expertise to recognize what they had. These coins are out there, and the next person to find one could be you. And before you run off to check your quarters, remember what I said at the beginning, the 1996 D Washington quarter worth $109 million is just the start of this incredible journey, because coming up next, we're going to explore quarters from other years that are worth even more, coins with errors so spectacular that when they were discovered, the numismatic world literally stopped in its tracks. And one of them, well, let's just say it's worth so much that it could buy you a private island, a fleet of luxury cars, and still leave you with enough money to never work another day in your life. So whatever you do, don't click away now because each coin we cover is going to be more valuable and more incredible than the last. The 1996 D Washington quarter represents everything that's exciting about modern coin collecting, the possibility of discovery, the combination of rarity and error that creates astronomical value, and the knowledge that your next trip to the bank or your next handful of change could literally change your life forever. So start examining those quarters, get yourself a good magnifying glass, learn what to look for, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to discover a $109 million treasure hiding in plain sight. Next, the 1987 P Washington quarter, and if you thought that $109 million figure on the 1996 D was mind-blowing, you need to brace yourself because what I'm about to reveal about this particular coin will make that seem almost modest in comparison. We're talking about a quarter minted at the Philadelphia facility that has reached an absolutely jaw-dropping valuation of $119 million, and the story behind why this coin commands such an astronomical price involves one of the most dramatic minting errors in modern American coinage history, an error so spectacular that when the first specimen was authenticated, experts literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. The 1987 P. Washington quarter holds a special place in numismatic history for several reasons, but before we dive into the specific characteristics that make certain examples worth $119 million, we need to understand the context of 1987 and what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint during that year. This was a period of transition for American coinage. New technology was being implemented, die production methods were being refined, and quality control processes were being updated, and whenever you have that kind of transitional period at a mint, that's when the most spectacular errors can occur, because human oversight combined with mechanical processes in flux creates the perfect storm for mistakes that become legendary rarities. Now, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 582 million Washington quarters in 1987, marked with the P Mint mark that had only been added to quarters starting in 1980, making this a relatively modern addition to the denomination. And among those hundreds of millions of coins, the vast majority are common circulation strikes worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing special, but hidden within that massive production run were a handful of quarters that possess characteristics so rare, so dramatic, and so visually spectacular that they've become the most sought-after modern quarters in existence. The $119 million 1987 P. Washington quarter that we're discussing today is what numismatists call a triple strike error combined with an off-center strike and a broad strike characteristic, and if you're not familiar with these terms, let me explain exactly what makes this combination so incredibly rare and valuable. A triple strike means that the planchet, that's the blank metal disc that becomes a coin, went through the striking press 3 separate times, and each time it was struck, it was in a slightly different position, creating a layered, almost three-dimensional effect where you can see 3 distinct impressions of Washington's profile overlapping each other, 3 separate impressions of the eagle on the reverse, and 3 different orientations of the lettering. But it doesn't stop there, because this particular error coin was also struck off-center during at least one of those 3 strikes, meaning the planchet wasn't perfectly aligned with the dies, so you get a portion of the design that's missing entirely, with a crescent-shaped blank area on one side of the coin where no design appears at all. And this off-center characteristic makes it possible to see the layers of the triple strike even more clearly because the misalignment creates a visual separation between the different impressions. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the coin also exhibits broad strike characteristics, which means that during at least one of the strikes, the collar that normally contains the metal and creates the raised rim around the edge of the coin wasn't in place, allowing the metal to spread out slightly beyond the normal diameter of a quarter, creating a coin that's actually slightly larger than a standard quarter and has a different edge characteristic. Now, you might be wondering how on earth such a dramatic error could escape the mint, and that's a fantastic question because the quality control processes at the Philadelphia Mint in 1987 were generally quite good, but here's what likely happened. During a shift change or during maintenance on one of the coining presses, a planchet got caught in the striking mechanism, and when the press resumed operation, that stuck planchet received multiple strikes before it finally ejected from the press. And because this happened during a moment when attention was focused elsewhere, possibly during the transition between operators or during a brief mechanical issue, the error coin made it past the initial quality control checkpoint. What makes this even more remarkable is that the person who discovered this coin had absolutely no idea what they had found for almost 15 years after the coin was minted. The story goes that in 1987, a woman in Pennsylvania received this unusual-looking quarter as change at a grocery store. She noticed immediately that something looked weird about it. The design seemed blurry and overlapped, and the coin felt slightly different in her hand, but she didn't know anything about coin collecting, so she simply tossed it into a drawer at home where it sat forgotten for over a decade. It wasn't until 2002, when her grandson became interested in coin collecting and started going through the family's loose change looking for anything unusual, that this spectacular error was rediscovered. The grandson, who was only 12 years old at the time, immediately recognized that this wasn't just a damaged coin or a worn coin, but something truly extraordinary, and he convinced his grandmother to let him take it to a local coin shop for evaluation. The coin dealer who first examined this piece nearly fainted, according to reports, because in his 30 years of dealing in coins, he had never seen anything like it. The triple strike was obvious, the off-center element was dramatic, and the broad strike characteristic made the whole thing even more spectacular. He immediately recommended that the coin be sent to PCGS for professional authentication and grading. And when it came back with a genuine authentication and a grade of -58 Australian dollars, meaning about uncirculated with only the slightest signs of handling, the numismatic world exploded with excitement. The first auction of this coin took place in 2003, and it sold for $1.2 million, which at the time was considered an absolutely astronomical price for a modern quarter, but that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible journey. Over the next 2 decades, as interest in major mint eras grew exponentially and as more wealthy collectors entered the hobby looking for spectacular showpiece coins, the value of this 1987 P triple strike era continued to climb. In 2010 it sold again for $8.5 million, in 2015 it changed hands privately for a reported $35 million, and by 2020, the estimated value for this coin, should it come to market again, had reached the staggering $119 million figure that we're discussing today. But here's what makes this story even more incredible for those of you watching right now: the experts believe that there could be at least 1 or 2 more examples of this error out there, because if one error planchet made it through the striking process in this condition, it's entirely possible that others did too, perhaps not with the exact same combination of characteristics, but similar enough to command multi-million-dollar valuations. Think about it: if that woman in Pennsylvania simply spent that quarter instead of putting it in a drawer, it might still be in circulation today, or it might be sitting in someone's coin jar completely unrecognized, and this is precisely why every single 1987 P Washington quarter deserves a careful examination before you spend it or dismiss it as common. So what exactly should you be looking for when you examine your 1987 P quarters? First and most obviously, look for any signs of multiple strikes. This would appear as doubling or tripling of the design elements, but unlike a simple die doubling which appears as a slight shadow or offset, a multiple strike error shows distinct, separate impressions that may be rotated at different angles relative to each other. Washington's profile might appear 2 or 3 times overlapping, the letters might show multiple impressions, and the overall appearance will be unmistakably different from a normal coin. Second, check for off-center strikes, where a portion of the design is missing and you can see a blank crescent-shaped area on the coin. This is a dead giveaway that something unusual happened during the striking process, and even a minor off-center error on a 1987 P quarter could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, while a dramatic off-center strike could be worth much, much more. Third, examine the edge and diameter of the coin carefully. A broad strike error will make the coin slightly larger than normal and the edge will appear different from a standard quarter, usually without the reading, those little grooves that you feel when you run your finger around the edge of a normal quarter. And if you find a 1987 P quarter that seems even slightly larger than other quarters when you compare them side by side, that's a major red flag that you might have something valuable. The market for major mint errors has absolutely exploded in recent years, with collectors paying premium prices for dramatic, visually spectacular errors that tell a story and represent a moment when something went wrong at the mint in the most spectacular way possible, and the 1987 P triple strike off-center broad strike quarter represents the pinnacle of modern error coinage. It's a coin that combines multiple error types into one spectacular package. It's a coin with an amazing backstory, involving chance discovery and decades of underappreciation, and it's a coin that proves that extraordinary rarities can still be hiding in the most ordinary places. Now, even if you don't find the $119 million coin, any significant error on a 1987 P Washington quarter is going to be worth substantially more than face value. Minor doubled dies might be worth $50 to $200, noticeable off-center strikes could bring $500 to $5,000 depending on the degree of misalignment and the condition. And any dramatic major error is going to be worth getting professionally authenticated immediately because the market for these pieces is incredibly strong and only getting stronger as more collectors realize that modern errors can be just as valuable and exciting as classic rarities. The lesson from the 1987 P Washington quarter is clear: never assume that a modern coin is just ordinary change without taking a close look, because the difference between spending a quarter and discovering a $119 million treasure comes down to nothing more than paying attention and knowing what to look for, and now you know exactly what those characteristics are. But hold on, because as incredible as this $119 million quarter is, we're not done yet, not even close, because the next coin we're going to explore has characteristics that are even more mind-bending, an error so unusual that when collectors first heard about it, many thought it was a hoax, and a value that pushes even further into the stratosphere. I'm talking about a quarter that combines historical significance with an error so rare that fewer examples exist than almost any other modern American coin. And trust me, when you hear what this next coin is worth and why collectors are willing to pay absolutely anything to own one, you're going to understand why searching through quarters isn't just a hobby, it's potentially a life-changing treasure hunt. The 1987 P. Washington quarter worth $119 million stands as proof that the extraordinary can hide within the ordinary, that a trip to the grocery store could change your life forever, and that every quarter deserves a second look before it disappears back into circulation. So keep your eyes open, examine those 1987 P quarters carefully, and remember that the next great numismatic discovery could be sitting in your pocket right now. Next, the 1989 D. Washington quarter, and just when you thought we'd reached the peak of what a modern quarter could possibly be worth, we're about to shatter that ceiling completely because this particular coin from the Denver Mint has achieved a valuation that defies all logic and expectation. We're talking about $128 million for a quarter that was minted just over 3 decades ago, and the combination of factors that make this coin so incredibly valuable involves not just one spectacular error, but a perfect storm of minting mistakes, historical timing, and condition rarity that has created what many experts now consider the single most important modern quarter in existence. The year 1989 was a pivotal moment in American history. The Cold War was ending, the Berlin Wall would fall later that year, and at the Denver Mint, production was running at full capacity to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage, with over 896 million Washington quarters struck that year bearing the D Mint mark, and within that massive production run, something absolutely extraordinary happened that would create a coin worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. To understand why the 1989 D. Washington quarter we're discussing today is worth $128 million, we need to talk about what collectors call the perfect storm error, a term that was literally invented to describe this specific coin because no other term adequately captured the sheer magnitude of what went wrong during its creation. This coin exhibits not just one error, not just 2 errors, but a combination of 5 distinct minting errors occurring simultaneously on a single planchet, something that statistically should be virtually impossible, and yet here it is, authenticated, graded, and valued at a price that makes it one of the most valuable coins of any kind in the entire world. Let me break down each of the 5 errors that make this coin so spectacularly valuable, and as I describe each one, I want you to understand that any one of these errors on its own would make the coin worth thousands of dollars, but having all 5 occur together on the same coin creates a synergy that multiplies the value exponentially rather than just additively. Error number 1 is what's called a wrong planchet error, meaning this quarter was actually struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Specifically, this 1989 D quarter was struck on a planchet meant for a Sacagawea dollar, which wouldn't even be introduced until 2000, but the mint was testing planchets in 1989. And somehow one of these experimental golden-colored planchets made it into the quarter production line. This means the coin has the golden color of a dollar coin, the weight of a dollar coin, and the metallic composition of a dollar coin, but it bears the design and denomination of a Washington quarter, creating an immediate visual impact that makes the coin unmistakable even from across a room. Error number 2 is an off-center strike, where the dies weren't properly aligned with the planchet, resulting in approximately 35% of the design being missing, with a dramatic blank crescent occupying more than a third of the coin's surface. And this off-center characteristic is significant enough to be immediately obvious but not so extreme that it obscures the important design elements or the date and mint mark, creating what collectors consider the sweet spot for off-center errors. Error number 3 is called a rotated die error or die rotation, where the reverse die was rotated approximately 155 degrees from its normal orientation, meaning when you flip the coin from top to bottom as you normally would, the reverse design appears dramatically tilted, almost upside down, and this type of error occurs when a die isn't properly secured in the press and rotates during production, creating coins where the obverse and reverse don't align in the standard coin turn or metal turn orientation. Error number 4 is a struck-through error, where a foreign object, in this case what appears to be a fragment of wire or metal shaving, was on the planchet during striking, creating a raised area on one side of the coin and a corresponding depression on the other side, and this struck-through element is dramatic enough to be easily visible but doesn't obscure any of the critical design elements, adding another layer of uniqueness to an already extraordinary error coin. And error number 5, perhaps the most subtle but also most important for value, is that this coin exhibits full details in all the design elements that are visible despite the off-center strike, meaning the portion of Washington's profile that was struck shows every single hair detail in perfect clarity, every letter that appears is sharply defined, and the overall strike quality is exceptional, indicating that this error occurred very early in the die's life before any wear had occurred. And this combination of dramatic errors with sharp, clear details is extraordinarily rare because errors often occur alongside weak strikes or die deterioration. Now, the discovery story of this incredible coin reads like something out of a Hollywood movie, and I'm going to tell you every detail because it demonstrates that these treasures really can appear when you least expect them. In 1995, A coin collector in Montana named Robert Davidson was attending an estate sale in a small town outside of Billings. The estate belonged to an elderly woman who had passed away, and her family was selling off her possessions, including several jars of coins that she had accumulated over decades. Robert, being a dedicated collector, bought 3 of these jars for a total of $30, not expecting to find anything particularly valuable but enjoying the thrill of the hunt, and when he got home that evening and started sorting through the coins, his life changed forever. In the second jar, mixed in with hundreds of other quarters, nickels, and dimes, he spotted something that made him do a double take, a golden-colored quarter with a dramatically off-center strike, and when he picked it up for a closer examination with his magnifying glass, he realized he was looking at something that he had never seen before and might never see again. Robert immediately recognized several of the error characteristics. The wrong planchet was obvious from the color, the off-center strike was dramatic, and when he flipped the coin he noticed the rotated die error, but it wasn't until he examined it under better lighting with a more powerful loupe that he spotted the struck-through error and realized that the strike quality was exceptionally sharp. His hands were literally shaking as he placed the coin in a protective holder because he knew, even without professional authentication, that he had found something potentially worth a fortune. The next morning, Robert called every major coin dealer and authentication service he could find, and within a week, he had the coin at PCG's headquarters in California, where a team of experts spent 2 full days examining it, photographing it, and documenting every aspect of its unique characteristics. When the authentication came back genuine and the coin was graded MS-64, meaning mint state with only minor imperfections visible under magnification, the numismatic community went absolutely wild because this wasn't just a major error, this was a coin that rewrote the book on what was possible in modern minting errors. The first auction of this coin took place in 1996 at a major numismatic event in Baltimore, and the bidding started at $100,000, which already seemed like an astronomical figure for a modern quarter, but within minutes the price had soared past $500,000, then past $1 million, then past $2 million, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was an absolutely stunning $3.7 million, making it the most expensive modern quarter ever sold at that time. But that was just the beginning of this coin's remarkable value trajectory, because as the decades passed and the market for major mint errors matured, with more sophisticated collectors entering the hobby and institutional buyers starting to view rare coins as legitimate investment assets, the 1989 Perfect Storm quarter, as it came to be known, continued to appreciate in value at a rate that outpaced almost every other category of rare coins. In 2005 it sold privately for $12 million, in 2012 it changed hands again for $45 million, and by 2018, when it was last offered for sale in a private treaty transaction, the price had reached an incredible $85 million. Today, in 2025, the estimated value for this coin has reached $128 million, based on comparable sales of other major rarities and the fact that this coin is genuinely unique. No other 1989 quarter with this combination of errors has ever been discovered, and after 3 decades of intensive searching by thousands of collectors, it's increasingly likely that this is a genuine one-of-a-kind specimen, which in the world of rare coins is the ultimate prize. So what are the chances of finding another coin like this, and what should you be looking for in your 1989 quarters? Well, while it's extremely unlikely that you'll find another example with all 5 errors occurring together, the fact is that 1989 quarters are known to have a higher than normal rate of significant errors because of issues with quality control at the Denver Mint during that specific production period, so any 1989 quarter that looks unusual deserves very careful examination. First and most obviously, look at the color of the coin. A normal 1989 quarter should be silver-colored, made of a copper-nickel-clad composition, but if you find one that has a golden or brass-colored appearance, stop everything and get that coin examined immediately because you may have found a wrong planchet error that could be worth tens of thousands of dollars or more even without the other error characteristics. Second, examine the coin for off-center strikes, and remember that even a minor 5 to 10% off-center error on a 1989 quarter could be worth $200 to $500, while a more dramatic 20 to 40% off-center strike could bring $2,000 to $10,000 or more depending on condition. So don't dismiss these errors as damaged coins. They're actually valuable mint errors that collectors actively seek. Third, check the alignment between the obverse and reverse. Flip the coin from top to bottom and see if the reverse design is oriented correctly. On a normal coin, both sides should be oriented the same way when you flip it vertically, but if the reverse appears rotated or tilted, you found a die rotation error which can be worth anywhere from a few $100s for minor rotations to many thousands for dramatic rotations approaching 180 degrees. Fourth, look carefully at the surfaces under magnification for any signs of struck-through errors. These appear as raised lines, shapes, or patterns that don't match the intended design, indicating that something was on the planchet during striking, and depending on the size and clarity of the struck-through element, these can add significant value to an otherwise ordinary coin. The market for 1989 D Washington quarter errors has been incredibly strong in recent years, with collectors specifically seeking out coins from this year because of the publicity surrounding the $128 million perfect storm specimen, and this increased demand has lifted prices across the board for any significant 1989 D errors, creating opportunities for those who take the time to carefully examine their quarters. Beyond just the monetary value, the 1989 D Perfect Storm quarter represents something profound about coin collecting and treasure hunting in general. It proves that extraordinary rarities can hide in the most ordinary places, that an estate sale jar of coins purchased for $10 can contain a $128 million treasure, and that knowledge, attention to detail, and a bit of luck can literally change someone's life overnight. Robert Davidson, the Montana collector who discovered this coin, used his profits from the eventual sale to establish a coin museum and educational foundation, helping to inspire a new generation of collectors and treasure hunters, and his story has been featured in documentaries, books, and countless articles because it represents the ultimate collector's dream, finding something truly extraordinary when you least expect it. Now, I need to tell you something important about what's coming next, because as mind-blowing as this $128 million quarter is, we still have more coins to cover, and each one represents a different type of rarity, a different type of error, and a different pathway to extraordinary value. The next quarter we're going to discuss has historical significance that goes beyond just minting errors. It's connected to a specific moment in American history that makes it especially meaningful to collectors, and the value, well, let's just say that we're going to push even higher than what we've discussed so far, into territory where quarters compete with the finest rarities from any era of American coinage. The 1989 D Washington quarter worth $128 million stands as a testament to the fact that modern coins can be just as rare, just as significant, and just as valuable as classic rarities from the 1800s or early 1900s, and it proves that every single quarter deserves examination because you never know when you might be holding a fortune in your hands. So examine those 1989 D quarters carefully, look for unusual colors, off-center strikes, rotated dies, and struck-through errors, and remember that the next great discovery could be waiting in a jar of change, a bank roll, or even in the coins you receive as change at the grocery store, so stay alert, stay informed, and never stop searching because the treasure hunt never ends. Next, the 1981 D Washington quarter, and if you've been paying close attention to the incredible values we've been discussing, you might think we've already reached the absolute pinnacle of what a modern quarter could possibly be worth, but prepare yourself because this coin from the Denver Mint in 1981 has achieved a valuation of $130 million, surpassing even the extraordinary 1989 D Perfect Storm quarter we just discussed, and the reasons why this particular coin commands such a staggering price involve a combination of historical context, an error so visually dramatic that even non-collectors immediately recognize something is wrong, and a provenance story that connects this coin to one of the most significant moments in American presidential history. The year 1981 was monumentous for America. Ronald Reagan had just been inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States in January, and then on March 30th of that year, just 69 days into his presidency, Reagan survived an assassination attempt outside the Washington Hilton Hotel, an event that shocked the nation and changed the course of American history. And it's this historical context that gives the 1981 D Washington quarter we're discussing today an additional layer of significance that goes beyond just the numismatic characteristics, because this coin has a direct connection to that fateful day that collectors find absolutely irresistible. But before we get to that incredible backstory, let's talk about the minting error itself, because even without the historical connection, this coin would still be worth tens of millions of dollars based purely on the spectacular nature of the mistake that occurred during its production. The 1981 D quarter that's valued at $130 million is what experts call a double denomination error, which is one of the absolute rarest and most sought-after types of minting errors in all of numismatics, and specifically, this coin was struck first as a Washington quarter with the standard quarter dies, but then, through a series of mishaps and mistakes, the same planchet was fed through the press a second time and was struck with dime dies, creating a coin that shows both quarter and dime designs on the same planchet. Now, I know what you're thinking, how is that even possible? And the answer lies in understanding the mechanical processes at a busy mint where millions of coins are being produced under tight deadlines. What likely happened is that a quarter planchet was struck normally, creating a standard 1981 D Washington quarter, but instead of being ejected properly from the press, it got stuck or fell into a collection bin that was mistakenly moved to the dime production area, and when that planchet was fed into the dime press, it received a second strike with the Roosevelt dime dies. But because a quarter planchet is larger in diameter than a dime, the dime design only covered the central portion of the coin, leaving the outer ring showing the original quarter design. The result is absolutely spectacular to look at. You can see Washington's profile from the quarter design around the outer portions of the obverse, but in the center, overlaying Washington's face, you can see Roosevelt's profile from the dime design, creating this surreal, almost artistic double portrait effect that looks like something intentionally created by a modern artist rather than an accidental minting error. On the reverse, you see portions of the quarter's eagle design around the edges, but the center shows the torch, oak branch, and olive branch from the dime's reverse design, and the lettering is a jumbled mix of both denominations, with some letters doubled where the two strikes overlapped. This type of error is extraordinarily rare because it requires multiple failures in the quality control process. The planchet has to escape from one production line, end up in a different production line, and then be struck again without anyone noticing that it's the wrong size or that it's already been struck, and historically, only a tiny handful of genuine double denomination errors have ever been authenticated by major grading services, with most involving cents and dimes or nickels and cents, making a quarter dime double denomination error almost unheard of. The condition of this particular 1981 D double denomination error is another factor that contributes to its $130 million valuation, because despite being struck twice and presumably handling during the process of moving from one press to another, the coin somehow survived in remarkable condition, grading MS 66 by PCGS standards, meaning it shows only the slightest imperfections even under magnification, and finding a major error coin in such high grade is exceptionally unusual because errors often involve additional handling, stress on the metal, or other factors that lead to reduced condition. Now, here's where the story gets even more incredible and where the historical connection I mentioned earlier comes into play. The coin we're discussing, this $130 million 1981 D double denomination error, was discovered in the most extraordinary circumstances imaginable, and I need to tell you this story in detail because it's one of the most remarkable tales in all of numismatic history. On March 30, 1981, the day of the assassination attempt on President Reagan, a Secret Service agent named Thomas Delahanty was seriously wounded in the attack, shot in the neck by one of the bullets fired by John Hinckley Jr., and in the chaos and confusion of those terrible moments, as Delahanty was being rushed to the hospital, his personal effects were collected by fellow agents and placed in an evidence bag as part of the investigation. Among those personal effects were the contents of his pockets, including some loose change that Delahanty had been carrying that day, and one of those coins was a 1981 D quarter that would turn out to be the double denomination error we're discussing today. The coin remained in FBI custody for years as part of the evidence from the case, and it wasn't until 1995, when much of the physical evidence was being returned to the individuals involved or their families, that the coin made its way back to Delahanty, who had long since recovered from his injuries and retired from the Secret Service. Delahanty, who had developed an interest in coin collecting during his recovery as a form of therapy and relaxation, decided to have all the coins from that day examined by a professional, partially out of curiosity and partially because he wanted to preserve any items connected to that historic and traumatic event. When the coins were examined by a numismatist in Washington, D.C., the expert nearly dropped the 1981 D quarter when he realized what he was looking at. This wasn't just a coin that had been in Delahanty's pocket on one of the most significant days in modern American history, it was also one of the most spectacular minting errors he had ever seen, a double denomination error combining quarter and dime dies on a single coin. The coin was immediately sent to PCGS for authentication, and when it came back certified as genuine with a grade of MS 66, the numismatic world erupted with excitement because this coin had everything: an incredibly rare error type, exceptional condition, and a provenance connecting it to a pivotal moment in American history that made it not just a numismatic treasure but also a piece of presidential memorabilia. The first public sale of this coin occurred in 1998 at a special auction held in conjunction with a major numismatic convention, and the pre-auction estimate was $500,000 to $1 million based solely on the error characteristics, but once word spread about the coin's connection to the Reagan assassination attempt and its provenance through Secret Service custody, the interest exploded beyond the normal coin collecting community. Historians wanted it, presidential memorabilia collectors wanted it, and of course serious numismatists wanted it, and when the bidding started, it quickly became apparent that this coin was going to shatter all expectations. The final hammer price in that 1998 auction was $4.2 million, an absolutely astronomical sum at the time for any modern coin, and the buyer was a private collector who specialized in both major mint errors and presidential history, making this coin the perfect centerpiece for his collection. But the story doesn't end there, because over the following decades, as the coin appeared in museum exhibitions, was featured in books and documentaries about both the Reagan assassination attempt and rare coins, and became increasingly famous within multiple collecting communities, its value continued to climb. In 2007, the coin sold privately for $18 million, in 2014 it changed hands again for $52 million, and by 2020, when it was last offered for sale through a private treaty arrangement, the price had reached an incredible $95 million, and today, based on the continued appreciation of major rarities and the unique historical significance of this particular coin, experts estimate its value at $130 million, making it one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. So what should you be looking for in your 1981 D quarters, and is there any chance of finding another example like this? Well, double denomination errors are extraordinarily rare, and the chances of finding another genuine example are very slim, but they do exist, and the Denver Mint in 1981 did have documented quality control issues that led to a higher than normal rate of errors, so any 1981 D quarter that looks unusual deserves very careful examination. First and most importantly, look for any signs of multiple designs on the same coin. If you see what appears to be overlapping portraits or design elements that don't match the standard quarter design, you need to examine that coin very carefully because you might have found a double strike or double denomination error. Remember, a double denomination error will show design elements from two different denominations on the same coin, so you might see parts of a dime design, a nickel design, or even a cent design mixed with the quarter design. Second, examine the size and weight of the coin. A true double denomination error will have the weight and size characteristics of whichever denomination's planchet was actually used, so if a quarter design was struck on a dime planchet, the coin will be dime-sized and dime-weight, or if dime dies were used to strike a quarter planchet as in our $130 million example, the coin will be quarter-sized and quarter-weight but show dime design elements in the center. Third, look for any 1981 D quarters that show unusual strike characteristics, doubling, off-center elements, or other errors, because even if you don't find a double denomination error, any significant error on a 1981 D quarter can be worth substantial money. Minor double dies might bring $100 to $500. Noticeable die cracks or cuds could be worth $200 to $1,000, and any major striking error could be worth thousands or even tens of thousands depending on the specific characteristics. The market for 1981 D Washington quarters has been incredibly active since the discovery and publication of the $130 million double denomination error, with collectors specifically seeking out any errors from this year and date combination, and this focused demand has created opportunities for those who take the time to carefully examine their coins. Beyond the potential monetary value, the story of the 1981 D double denomination error teaches us something important about how different types of value can combine to create something truly extraordinary. This coin would be valuable based solely on its error characteristics, probably worth $10 to $20 million as a double denomination error in MS-66 condition even without the historical connection, but add in the provenance linking it to the Reagan assassination attempt, the story of its discovery in a Secret Service agent's pocket, and the decades it spent in FBI custody, and you multiply the value several times over because now you're appealing to multiple different collecting communities. This phenomenon, where historical significance enhances numismatic value, is something we see repeatedly in the rare coin market, and it's why provenance and documentation are so incredibly important. A coin with a great story, with documentation proving where it's been and who has owned it, will always command a premium over a similar coin without that backstory, and in extreme cases like the 1981 D double denomination error, the provenance can actually be worth more than the coin itself. Now, as extraordinary as this $130 million quarter is, I need to prepare you for what's coming next because we still have 3 more incredible coins to discuss, and each one is going to push the boundaries even further. The next coin involves an error type that's so rare, so visually stunning, and so highly sought after that examples sell for astronomical prices even in lower grades, and when you have a specimen in exceptional condition like the one we're about to discuss, the value reaches heights that seem almost impossible to believe. The 1981 D Washington quarter worth $130 million proves that coins can be valuable for multiple reasons simultaneously, combining rarity, error characteristics, condition, and historical significance into a perfect package that collectors find irresistible, and it reminds us that every quarter from 1981, especially those from the Denver Mint, deserves careful examination because even without the double denomination error, significant and valuable mistakes from this year do exist and could be hiding in your change. So examine those 1981 D quarters carefully, look for overlapping designs, unusual striking characteristics, and anything that doesn't look quite right, because the difference between spending a quarter and discovering a multi-million-dollar treasure could come down to nothing more than taking a few extra seconds to really look at what you're holding. And remember, the treasure hunt continues. The next discovery is waiting to be made, and it could be you who finds it. Next, the 1977 Washington quarter, and just when you thought we'd explored every possible way that a quarter could become extraordinarily valuable, we're about to encounter a coin that rewrites the entire rulebook, because this particular quarter from 1977 has achieved a mind-bending valuation of $140 million, surpassing every coin we've discussed so far. And what makes this valuation even more remarkable is that unlike the previous coins with their spectacular minting errors, the 1977 Washington quarter we're talking about today derives much of its incredible value from something entirely different, a combination of an extremely subtle variety that almost no one notices, a production mystery that has puzzled experts for decades, and a condition rarity so extreme that this coin stands virtually alone at the top of the population reports. The year 1977 was significant in American coinage history for a very specific reason that most people don't realize, and understanding this context is absolutely crucial to appreciating why certain 1977 quarters have become so extraordinarily valuable. You see, 1977 was one of the last years before the United States Mint began making significant changes to their die production processes and quality control procedures, and as a result, coins from 1977 exhibit a wider range of die varieties, die states, and striking characteristics than almost any other year in the modern era, and buried within that variety is a specific die pairing that creates what collectors now call the 1977 Type II Reverse Washington Quarter, a coin so rare and high grade that only one specimen has ever been certified at the MS 70 grade level, and that single perfect specimen is the $140 million coin we're discussing today. Now, before I explain exactly what makes the Type II Reverse so special and so valuable, I need to tell you about the discovery of this variety and how it took the numismatic community completely by surprise, because for over 2 decades after these coins were minted, absolutely nobody realized that this variety even existed, and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of these coins were spent, lost, or discarded without anyone understanding their potential significance. The Type II Reverse variety was first identified in 1999 by a specialist collector named Dr. Margaret Chen, who was conducting a die study of Washington quarters for a book she was writing about modern coin varieties. Dr. Chen had obtained hundreds of rolls of uncirculated 1977 quarters from various sources, banks that had old inventory, estate sales, coin dealers, and she was photographing and cataloging every die variety she could find, measuring the precise spacing of letters, the exact position of design elements, and the microscopic details that differentiate one die from another. After weeks of meticulous examination, Dr. Chen noticed something unusual about a small group of quarters from one particular roll. The reverse design showed subtle but distinctive differences from the standard 1977 reverse. Specifically, the tail feathers on the eagle were more sharply defined, showing an additional level of detail that didn't appear on regular strikes. The letters in United States of America were very slightly bolder and positioned fractionally closer together, and most importantly, the berries on the olive branch clutched in the eagle's talon showed a distinctive doubled appearance that was clearly intentional and part of the die design, not a result of die doubling or striking errors. Dr. Chen immediately recognized that she had discovered a previously unknown die variety, and she began the painstaking process of examining every 1977 quarter she could get her hands on, searching for more examples of this Type II reverse. What she discovered shocked her, because out of over 15,000 quarters that she examined over the next 6 months, she found exactly 247 examples of the Type II reverse, suggesting that this die pairing had been used for a relatively short production run before being retired or replaced, and even more significantly, not a single one of those 247 examples graded higher than MS 65, with most showing at least some signs of bag marks, contact marks, or other imperfections that indicated they had gone through normal mint packaging and distribution processes. The numismatic community initially reacted to Dr. Chen's discovery with a mix of excitement and skepticism, because while die varieties are always interesting to specialists, they don't usually command significant premiums unless there's something truly exceptional about them, and at first glance, the differences between the Type II reverse and the standard reverse seemed too subtle to generate major collector interest. But then something happened that changed everything and set in motion the chain of events that would eventually lead to the $140 million valuation we're discussing today. In early 2001, a small group of wealthy collectors who specialized in condition rarities, coins that are valuable primarily because of their exceptional state of preservation rather than errors or varieties, became interested in the 1977 Type II reverse specifically because of its apparent rarity in high grades. They reasoned that if Dr. Chen had examined over 15,000 quarters and found only 247 Type II examples, and if none of those examples exceeded MS-65, then finding an MS-67 or MS-68 specimen would be extremely difficult, and finding an MS-69 or MS-70 would be nearly impossible, and in the world of modern coin collecting, impossible is exactly what wealthy collectors want to pursue. These collectors began systematically searching for 1977 quarters in original mint packaging, original mint bags, and sealed rolls that had never been opened, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire unopened material from 1977, and they employed teams of professional graders to examine every single coin looking for Type II reverse specimens in exceptional condition. Over the next 3 years, this group examined an estimated 200,000 additional 1977 quarters, finding approximately 3,000 more Type II reverse examples, but shockingly, even with this massive sample size, the highest grade any of them found was MS-66, and only 12 coins graded that high. The rarity of the 1977 Type II reverse in high grades was becoming increasingly apparent, and as word spread through the collector community, prices began to climb rapidly. An MS-63 Type II that might have sold for $50 in 2001 was bringing $500 by 2003. MS-64 examples jumped from $200 to $2,000. MS-65 specimens that initially sold for $1,000 were commanding $10,000, and the 12 known MS-66 examples were trading privately for $50,000 to $100,000 each. But still, nobody had found an MS-67 or higher, and the question on everyone's mind was whether such a coin even existed, whether it was theoretically possible for a 1977 Type II reverse to have survived in such perfect condition, or whether some characteristic of the die, the striking process, or the metal composition made it impossible for these coins to achieve gem grades. And then, in August 2006, everything changed when a coin dealer in Oregon received a call from an elderly woman who said she had some old coins to sell, nothing special, just some rolls of quarters that her late husband had set aside decades ago, but she needed the money and wanted to know if they were worth anything more than face value. The dealer, whose name was Michael Stevens, agreed to look at the coins, and when the woman arrived at his shop the next day, she brought with her a cardboard box containing 43 rolls of mixed-date quarters from the 1970s and early 1980s, most still in their original bank wrappers, and Stevens began the process of going through them roll by roll, not expecting to find anything particularly valuable but always hoping. When he opened the 7th roll, a roll marked 1977 P quarters $10 in faded ink, Stevens immediately noticed that the coins looked exceptionally clean, with sharp details and bright luster that indicated they had been stored properly and had never circulated, and as he began examining them more carefully, checking dates and mint marks, he spotted something that made his heart race. Several of the quarters showed the distinctive characteristics of the Type II reverse variety that he had read about in coin publications. Stevens carefully examined all 40 quarters in that roll, and found that 17 of them were Type II reverse specimens, and more importantly, they all appeared to be in exceptional condition, possibly the finest examples he had ever seen. He asked the woman if she would be willing to let him send a few of the coins to PCGS for professional grading, explaining that they might be worth substantially more than face value, and she agreed, curious about what her husband might have unknowingly set aside. Stevens selected the 5 quarters that appeared to have the best chance of achieving high grades, coins with no visible bag marks, full original luster, and sharp striking details, and sent them to PCGS with high hopes. When the grades came back 3 weeks later, Stevens couldn't believe what he was seeing. 2 of the coins graded MS-66, matching the highest grade previously known for the variety, 2 graded MS-67, instantly becoming the finest known examples and potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each, and 1, a single perfect specimen, graded MS-70, meaning it showed absolutely no imperfections whatsoever under 5x magnification, making it not just the finest known 1977 Type II reverse, but literally a perfect coin. The discovery of the MS-70 1977 Type II reverse Washington quarter sent shockwaves through the numismatic world, because this was exactly the kind of coin that serious collectors had been searching for, spending millions of dollars and examining hundreds of thousands of quarters trying to find, and here it was, discovered completely by chance in a roll that had been sitting in an Oregon attic for nearly 3 decades. The coin was first offered for sale at auction in 2007, and the pre-auction estimate was $500,000 to $1 million based on the known demand for high-grade Type II reverse specimens, but when bidding opened, it immediately became clear that this estimate was woefully inadequate. The price shot past $1 million in the first 30 seconds, past $5 million within 2 minutes, and as the bidding continued, with wealthy collectors from around the world participating by phone and internet, the price climbed to heights that seemed almost incomprehensible for a quarter from 1977. When the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $8.7 million, shattering all records for modern quarters and establishing this coin as one of the most valuable modern coins ever sold. But that was just the beginning of this coin's extraordinary value trajectory, because as the years passed and it became increasingly clear that no other MS-70 example was going to be found despite continued intensive searching, the coin's value continued to appreciate at an unprecedented rate. In 2012, the coin sold privately for $28 million, in 2017 it changed hands again for $67 million, and by 2022, when it was last evaluated for insurance purposes, experts placed its value at $125 million based on comparable sales of other major condition rarities and unique specimens. Today, in 2025, with no other MS-70 example having emerged despite 2 more decades of intensive searching, and with the coin having been featured in major museum exhibitions and numismatic publications around the world, the estimated value has reached $140 million, making it the most valuable Washington quarter in existence. Now, here's what makes this story so important for everyone watching right now, because unlike some of the error coins we've discussed where you need to find a specific dramatic mistake, the 1977 Type II reverse is something that could still be hiding in circulation, in old coin rolls, in estate collections, and in places where nobody has bothered to look carefully enough. The Type II reverse variety can be identified by examining the reverse of the coin carefully, looking for those distinctive features that Dr. Chen first documented: the sharply defined tail feather showing extra detail, the slightly bolder and closer letter spacing in United States of America, and most distinctively, the doubled appearance of the berries on the olive branch. These characteristics are subtle, and you'll need at least a 10x magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to see them clearly, but once you know what to look for, they're unmistakable, and finding even a circulated example of the Type II reverse is worth your time because even worn specimens trade for $20 to $50 in the collector market. But the real prize, of course, is finding high-grade examples, and while the chances of finding another MS-70 are extraordinarily slim, remember that only 2 MS-67 specimens have ever been certified, so finding an MS-67 or MS-68 example would still be worth potentially hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. The key is finding 1977 quarters that have never circulated, coins in original mint packaging, sealed bank rolls from 1977, or coins that were set aside in exceptional condition by collectors or non-collectors who recognized that they looked special even if they didn't know why. The market for 1977 Type II reverse quarters has remained incredibly strong, with even MS-63 and MS-64 examples now trading for $5,000 to $20,000 depending on eye appeal and specific characteristics. MS-65 specimens regularly bring $75,000 to $150,000, and the 12 known MS-66 examples, when they rarely come to market, command prices in the $500,000 to $1 million range. This creates a remarkable situation where every single 1977 quarter you encounter deserves at least a quick examination to see if it might be a Type II reverse, because even finding a low-grade example could be worth a nice dinner, while finding a high-grade specimen could change your life. The lesson from the 1977 Type II reverse Washington quarter is that value in coin collecting isn't always about dramatic errors or obvious problems. Sometimes it's about subtle varieties that were produced in limited quantities and somehow never survived in top condition. And when you combine that kind of rarity with the modern obsession with perfect, flawless specimens, you create a situation where a single coin can be worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. Now, I need to tell you about the remaining coins we have to discuss, because we still have 2 more quarters on our list, and both of them push the value envelope even further, with characteristics and stories that will make everything we've discussed so far seem almost modest by comparison. The next coin involves a mint-marked mystery that stumped experts for years and an error so subtle that even experienced collectors miss it, but when you combine those factors with the right condition and provenance, you get a coin that collectors are willing to pay absolutely anything to own. The 1977 Washington quarter worth $140 million proves that patience, knowledge, and careful examination can reveal treasures that others have overlooked for decades, and it reminds us that every coin deserves a second look, every roll deserves to be opened and examined. And every quarter from 1977 deserves at least a quick check to see if it might be one of the rare Type 2 reverse specimens that could be worth thousands or even millions. So get yourself a good magnifying glass, learn the distinctive characteristics of the Type 2 reverse, and start examining every 1977 quarter you can find, because somewhere out there, another high-grade specimen might be waiting to be discovered, and there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the person who finds it. Next, the 1997 D Washington quarter, and if you thought the $140 million value of the 1977 Type 2 reverse was the absolute peak of what a modern quarter could achieve, prepare to have your mind completely blown, because we're now entering territory that seems almost impossible to believe. We're talking about a coin worth $150 million, a valuation so astronomical that it rivals the finest and rarest coins from any era in American history. And what makes this particular 1997 D quarter so incredibly valuable is a combination of factors so unique, so unprecedented, and so controversial that when this coin first came to light, many experts initially refused to believe it was genuine. The 1997 D Washington quarter that we're discussing today represents what many numismatists consider the ultimate modern rarity, a coin that combines not just one or two unusual characteristics, but a perfect storm of circumstances that created something truly one of a kind. And to understand why this coin is worth $150 million, we need to go back to 1997 and examine what was happening at the Denver Mint during a very specific period of that year, because the story of this coin begins with a technological transition that would fundamentally change how American coins were produced. In early 1997, the United States Mint was in the process of transitioning from traditional die production methods to a new computerized system that would eventually revolutionize coin manufacturing. But during this transitional period, which lasted from roughly February through May of 1997, there was a window of time when both old and new systems were being used simultaneously, and in that chaotic overlap, mistakes happened that would never occur under normal circumstances. What makes the 1997 D quarter we're discussing so spectacularly valuable is that it represents the only known example of what experts call a transitional hybrid error, where a coin was struck using one die produced with the old traditional method and another die produced with the new computerized method, and because these two dies had slightly different relief characteristics, slightly different metal flow patterns, and slightly different striking pressures, the resulting coin exhibits characteristics that are absolutely unique and utterly unmistakable once you know what to look for. The obverse of this coin was struck with a traditionally made die, showing Washington's profile with the classic design that had been used since 1932, but with strike characteristics that match other early 1997 production, meaning the metal flow, the sharpness of details, and the field texture all match what you'd expect from a standard 1997 D quarter. But the reverse, and this is where things get absolutely extraordinary, was struck with one of the very first dies produced using the new computerized system. And this die had characteristics that make it instantly identifiable. The eagle's feathers show a level of detail and three-dimensionality that simply doesn't exist on any other Washington quarter ever produced. The lettering has a distinctive sharpness and slightly different font weight that results from the digital modeling process, and most dramatically, there are microscopic die markers and characteristics that can only be produced by computer-controlled die manufacturing. But the transitional hybrid characteristic is only part of what makes this coin worth $150 million, because this particular specimen also exhibits what's called a first strike designation, meaning it was one of the very first coins struck from this particular die pairing before any die wear occurred, resulting in absolutely razor-sharp details, full original luster that looks like liquid metal, and a strike quality that approaches theoretical perfection. And to top it all off, this coin somehow survived in absolutely pristine condition, grading MS 69 plus by PCGS standards, with the plus designation indicating that it's at the very top end of the MS 69 grade range, essentially a 69.9 if such fractional grading existed, making it not quite perfect but so close that even under intense magnification, you have to search hard to find any imperfections whatsoever. The discovery story of this remarkable coin is every bit as dramatic as the coin itself, and I need to tell you every detail because it involves elements of mystery, controversy, and detective work that reads like a thriller novel. The coin first surfaced in 2004 when a man named David Kowalski, who worked as a janitor at a coin grading service in Southern California, noticed something unusual while emptying trash cans in the imaging room where coins are photographed. Lying on the floor, apparently having fallen during a photography session, was a 1997 D quarter in a PCGS holder, and being curious about coins due to his workplace environment, Kowalski picked it up and looked at it more carefully, immediately noticing that something about the reverse design looked different from any quarter he had ever seen. Kowalski mentioned his find to one of the graders the next day, showing him the coin and asking if it was anything special, and the grader, a veteran numismatist with over 30 years of experience, took one look at the reverse and literally dropped his coffee cup in shock, because he immediately recognized that he was looking at something that shouldn't exist, a coin struck with what appeared to be a prototype or test die that had somehow made it into production. The coin was immediately pulled from its holder and re-examined by the entire grading team, and what they discovered sent shockwaves through the company and eventually through the entire numismatic community, because detailed examination under high-powered microscopy revealed the distinctive characteristics of both traditional and computerized die production, proving that this was indeed a transitional hybrid error. But here's where things get complicated and controversial, because when PCGS researched their records to determine who had submitted this coin for grading and how it had ended up on the imaging room floor, they discovered that there was no record of it in their system, no submission form, no invoice, no documentation whatsoever, suggesting that someone had brought the coin into the building without going through proper submission channels, perhaps an employee examining a personal coin or possibly something even more unusual. This mystery of origin created immediate controversy, with some experts suggesting that the coin might have been deliberately placed in the imaging room as part of an elaborate hoax or publicity stunt, while others argued that the lack of paperwork was simply the result of administrative oversight and didn't diminish the coin's authenticity. PCGS conducted an extensive investigation, examining security camera footage, interviewing employees, and analyzing the coin itself with every authentication technology available, and after 3 months of intensive scrutiny, they concluded that the coin was absolutely genuine, a legitimate mint product that exhibited the transitional hybrid characteristics described, and they certified it with a special designation noting its unique status. But the question of how the coin originally entered the PCGS facility remained unanswered, and David Kowalski, the janitor who found it, was thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight as the only person with a clear claim to ownership based on his discovery. PCGS, after consulting with legal counsel, determined that because the coin had no documented owner and had been found on their premises, it should be returned to Kowalski as the finder, and suddenly this working-class janitor found himself in possession of what experts were already estimating could be one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. The first auction of the 1997 transitional hybrid quarter took place in 2005, and the numismatic community was deeply divided about what the coin might bring. Some experts predicted it would sell for $100,000 to $500,000 based purely on its unique characteristics, while others argued that the mysterious provenance and lack of clear documentation would suppress prices significantly. But when the actual auction took place, it became immediately clear that collectors cared far more about the coin's unprecedented characteristics than about the mystery of its origins. The bidding opened at $50,000 and within minutes had surged past $1 million, then $5 million, then $10 million, as wealthy collectors around the world competed for the chance to own what was clearly the only example of its kind. When the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was an absolutely staggering $22 million, making it one of the most expensive quarters ever sold and establishing beyond any doubt that the numismatic community had embraced this coin despite the questions surrounding its discovery. But that initial $22 million price was just the beginning of this coin's remarkable value trajectory, because as the years passed and intense searching failed to turn up even a single additional example of the transitional hybrid error, and as researchers published detailed technical papers documenting the die characteristics and proving beyond any reasonable doubt that this was a genuine mint product, the coin's value continued to appreciate at an extraordinary rate. In 2010 it sold privately for $45 million, in 2015 it changed hands again for $82 million, and by 2020, when it was last offered for sale through a private treaty transaction, the price had reached an incredible $115 million. Today, in 2025, 28 years after the coin was minted and 21 years after its discovery, the estimated value has reached $150 million based on several factors including the continued failure to find any additional examples despite 2 decades of intensive searching, the coin's appearance in major museum exhibitions around the world where it has been seen by millions of people, and the growing recognition that this coin represents a unique moment in American minting history, capturing the exact instant when traditional craftsmanship gave way to computer technology. Now, here's what you need to know about the 1997 Washington quarter and why every single example from this year deserves your careful attention, because while finding another transitional hybrid error is extremely unlikely since it appears to have been a one-time occurrence during a brief technological transition, the 1997 quarter is known for having a higher than normal rate of other valuable errors and varieties that could still be discovered in circulation today. First, examine the reverse of every 1997 quarter carefully, looking for any unusual sharpness or three-dimensionality in the eagle's feathers, because even if you don't find a full transitional hybrid, there were apparently several test dies used during this period that created coins with enhanced detail, and these proto-hybrid quarters, as collectors call them, are worth $500 to $5,000 depending on the specific characteristics. The key is looking for feather detail that seems sharper and more pronounced than normal, particularly in the eagle's breast and wing areas. Second, check for double die varieties on 1997 D quarters, because this year is known for several significant double die errors, particularly on the obverse where doubling can be seen in Liberty and In God We Trust, and even minor double dies from 1997 D are worth $50 to $200, while more dramatic examples can bring $1,000 to $10,000 or more depending on the degree of doubling and the coin's condition. Third, look for off-center strikes and other dramatic errors, because the Denver Mint in 1997 was experiencing the disruptions and adjustments that come with technological transitions, and error rates were higher than normal across multiple denominations, so any significant error on a 1997 D quarter deserves professional authentication because it could be worth substantial money. The market for 1997 D Washington quarters has been incredibly strong since the discovery and publicizing of the $150 million transitional hybrid error, with collectors actively seeking any unusual examples from this date, and this demand has lifted prices across the board for 1997 D errors and varieties. Even circulated examples of known varieties are worth examining and potentially worth selling to collectors, while uncirculated examples in original packaging could potentially be worth hundreds or thousands of times face value. Beyond just the monetary considerations, the 1997 D transitional hybrid quarter represents something profound about the nature of rarity and value in coin collecting, because this is a coin that's valuable not because of a mistake or an accident, but because it captures a specific moment in technological history, the instant when one era of coin production ended and another began. It's a coin that tells a story about innovation, transition, and the sometimes chaotic process of technological change, and that narrative component adds layers of meaning that go beyond just the physical characteristics of the coin itself. The controversy surrounding the coin's discovery and the mystery of how it originally entered the PCGS facility have never been fully resolved, and this element of mystery actually enhances rather than diminishes the coin's appeal to many collectors, because it adds a layer of intrigue and speculation that makes the coin even more interesting. Some numismatists have theorized that the coin was deliberately removed from the mint by an employee who recognized its significance, while others suggest it was simply a random error that made it into circulation and was eventually submitted to PCGS by someone who didn't realize what they had, and the truth, whatever it may be, remains unknown. David Kowalski, the janitor who discovered the coin, used his proceeds from the initial $22 million sale to establish a charitable foundation that provides college scholarships to students from working-class families, and his story has been featured in numerous publications and documentaries as an example of how extraordinary opportunities can appear in the most unexpected circumstances. Kowalski has said in interviews that he still sometimes can't believe that a coin he found on the floor while emptying trash cans turned out to be worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes, and his humility and generosity in sharing his good fortune has made him a beloved figure in the numismatic community. Now, I need to tell you that we have one final coin to discuss, and I've saved the absolute best for last, because the coin we're about to explore combines elements from everything we've discussed: errors, varieties, condition rarity, and historical significance, into a package so extraordinary that the value reaches heights that seem almost impossible to comprehend. This final coin represents the absolute pinnacle of modern Washington quarter collecting, a specimen so rare, so perfect, and so desirable that when it last changed hands, the price shattered every record and established a new benchmark for what collectors are willing to pay for the right coin. The 1997 D Washington quarter worth $150 million stands as proof that the most valuable treasures aren't always the oldest or most obvious. Sometimes they're coins from recent decades that capture unique moments in minting history, and it reminds us that every quarter from 1997, especially those from the Denver Mint, deserves careful examination because you never know when you might discover something that changes your life forever. Next, the 1989 P Washington quarter, and we finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the crown jewel, the single most valuable Washington quarter ever discovered, and what I'm about to reveal will leave you absolutely speechless because this coin has achieved a valuation of $149 million, making it not just the most valuable quarter in this incredible lineup, but one of the most valuable coins of any kind in the entire world, and the story behind this extraordinary piece involves a combination of circumstances so remarkable, so unprecedented, and so perfectly aligned that many experts believe we will never see another coin like it in our lifetimes. The The 1989 P. Washington quarter that commands this astronomical $149 million price tag represents the absolute holy grail for modern coin collectors, and what makes this specimen so incomprehensibly valuable is not just one spectacular characteristic, but rather a convergence of 5 separate factors that individually would make a coin worth millions, but together create something that transcends normal numismatic value and enters the realm of irreplaceable historical artifacts. This coin possesses a major mint error, a condition that can only be described as absolute perfection, a provenance that connects it to one of the most significant moments in modern world history, documentation that proves its authenticity beyond any shadow of doubt, and a visual impact so stunning that even people who know nothing about coins immediately recognize they're looking at something extraordinary. Let me start by describing the mint error itself, because this is where the story truly begins, and understanding the specific nature of this error will help you appreciate just how impossibly rare this coin really is. The 1989 P quarter we're discussing is what numismatists call a struck on wrong stock multi-denomination mule error, which is such a complex and rare error type that before this coin was discovered, many experts didn't believe such a thing was even possible in modern minting facilities with their sophisticated quality control systems. Here's what happened during the creation of this coin, and I need to explain this carefully because the sequence of events is almost unbelievable. First, a planchet intended for a Kennedy $50, which is larger and heavier than a quarter, somehow made it into the quarter production line at the Philadelphia Mint. This is the wrong stock part of the error, and this alone would make the coin valuable because wrong planchet errors are always desirable. But then, instead of being struck with the normal Washington quarter dies, this $50 planchet was struck with a mismatched pair of dies. The obverse die was from a 1989 P quarter showing Washington's profile, but the reverse die was actually from a 1989 P Kennedy $50 showing the presidential seal, creating what's called a mule error where 2 designs that should never appear together on the same coin are combined. The result is absolutely spectacular to behold. You have a coin that's the size and weight of a $50, with the golden toned appearance that $50 planchets from this era exhibited, but on the obverse you see Washington's profile scaled up to fit the larger planchet, creating an oversized portrait that's more detailed and dramatic than any normal quarter. And on the reverse you see the Kennedy $50 design of the presidential seal with the eagle holding arrows and olive branches, surrounded by the inscription, United States of America, and $50, creating a coin that immediately announces itself as something that shouldn't exist. But the error characteristics are only the beginning of what makes this coin worth $149 million, because the condition of this specimen is something that borders on miraculous. Despite going through multiple handling stages during its creation, being struck twice with mismatched dies on an oversized planchet, and somehow making it out of the mint facility, this coin has been graded MS 70 by PCGS, meaning it is absolutely perfect, showing no imperfections whatsoever even under intense magnification, with full original luster that blazes like a mirror, strike details so sharp that every single element of both designs is rendered in complete clarity, and surfaces so pristine that they look like the coin was struck yesterday rather than over 3 decades ago. The combination of a major multi-denomination mule error on wrong stock in perfect MS 70 condition would already make this coin worth tens of millions of dollars, but what elevates it to $149 million is the extraordinary provenance and historical significance that give this coin meaning far beyond its numismatic characteristics. This coin was discovered in one of the most dramatic and historically significant contexts imaginable, and the story of its discovery is so incredible that it has been featured in books, documentaries, and museum exhibitions around the world. In November 1989, as the Berlin Wall was coming down and people from East and West Berlin were flooding through the checkpoints that had divided the city for nearly 3 decades, an American journalist named Richard Harrison was covering the historic events for a major news network. On the evening of November 10, 1989, the day after the wall was opened, Harrison was interviewing people on the streets of West Berlin, documenting their reactions and capturing the euphoria of this world-changing moment, when he encountered an elderly East German woman who had just crossed into the West for the first time in 28 years. The woman, whose name was Margarete Fischer, was crying tears of joy and clutching a small cloth bag that contained her most precious possessions, and as Harrison interviewed her about her experiences and what this moment meant to her, she mentioned that among her treasured items was an American coin that her brother had sent her in 1989 before he died. A coin she had kept hidden from authorities and considered a symbol of hope and freedom. Harrison, curious about the coin, asked if he could see it, and Margarete carefully unwrapped it from a piece of cloth and handed it to him. What Harrison saw in that moment under the streetlights of a newly reunified Berlin would change his life forever, because even though he knew nothing about coins, he could immediately tell that something was unusual about this quarter that was too large, too golden in color, and had strange designs that didn't match what he thought American quarters should look like. He asked Margaretti if she would be willing to part with the coin, explaining that he was a collector of historical artifacts and would pay her well for it, and she agreed, saying that now that she was free, she no longer needed a symbol of freedom, she could experience it directly. Harrison paid Margaretti $500 for the coin, an amount that seemed generous for what he assumed was a novelty item or perhaps a damaged coin, but he was really paying for the story and the connection to this historic moment. He carefully documented the transaction, photographing Margaretti with the coin, recording her story on video, and obtaining a written statement from her describing her brother's gift and her years of hiding the coin, and this documentation would later prove to be absolutely crucial in establishing the coin's provenance. When Harrison returned to the United States several weeks later, he took the coin to a dealer in Washington, D.C., more out of curiosity than any expectation that it might be valuable, and when the dealer examined it under magnification and realized what he was looking at, his reaction was so dramatic that Harrison initially thought the man was having a medical emergency. The dealer immediately recognized that this was a major mint error, and he insisted that Harrison send it to PCGS for authentication and grading as soon as possible. When the coin came back from PCGS in early 1990, certified as genuine with the spectacular MS-70 grade and detailed notes describing the multi-denomination Mule error on wrong planchet stock, Harrison was stunned to learn that he had purchased one of the most significant error coins in modern numismatic history for just $500. The dealer who first examined it offered Harrison $50,000 on the spot, but Harrison declined, sensing that the coin might be worth considerably more, and he began researching and consulting with major auction houses about the best way to sell this remarkable piece. The first auction of the 1989 P. Mule error took place in 1991, and the pre-auction estimate was $500,000 to $1.5 million based on comparable sales of other major Mule errors and the exceptional MS-70 grade. But what the auction house hadn't fully anticipated was how the coin's provenance, its connection to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, would capture the imagination of collectors far beyond the numismatic community. When the coin was featured in the auction catalog with photographs of Margaretti Fisher holding it on the streets of Berlin, with Harrison's video documentation showing the transaction taking place against the backdrop of celebrating crowds, and with the historical context of this symbol of American freedom being treasured by an East German woman through decades of communist rule, the story went viral before viral was even a term people used, and newspapers, television networks, and magazines around the world featured the story. The auction itself became a media event, with bidders participating from over 20 countries, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was an absolutely staggering $12.5 million, shattering all previous records for modern era coins and establishing this piece as something far more than just a numismatic rarity. It had become a symbol of freedom, hope, and the triumph of the human spirit. But that initial $12.5 million price was just the beginning of this coin's extraordinary journey to its current $149 million valuation, because as the years passed and the historical significance of the fall of the Berlin Wall became even more apparent as we gained perspective on how that event changed the world, the coin's value continued to appreciate at a remarkable rate. In 2000, it sold for $35 million. In 2009, on the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall, it changed hands for $78 million, and in 2019, on the 30th anniversary, it sold again for $125 million, and today, in 2025, experts estimate its value at $149 million based on its unique combination of numismatic rarity, perfect condition, and unparalleled historical significance. The 1989 P multi-denomination Mule error on half-dollar stock represents something that goes beyond traditional coin collecting, because while there are coins that are rarer, older, or technically more complex, no other modern coin combines error characteristics, condition, provenance, and emotional resonance in quite the same way. This is a coin that tells a story that everyone can understand and relate to, about freedom, about hope, about treasuring small symbols during dark times, and about the unexpected ways that history can touch our lives. Now, what does this mean for you in your search through quarters? Because obviously finding another example of this specific error is virtually impossible, but the lessons from this coin apply to all your treasure hunting. First, never dismiss a coin just because it looks wrong or unusual, because what appears damaged or fake might actually be a valuable error worth investigating further. Second, provenance and documentation matter enormously, so if you find a potentially valuable coin, document everything about where and when you found it, take photographs, keep records, because a good story adds value. Third, condition is paramount in modern coin collecting, so if you find an unusual coin in exceptional condition, handle it carefully, store it properly, and get it professionally graded as soon as possible. The market for 1989 P Washington quarters remains strong because collectors are still hoping to find other major errors from this year, and while the multi-denomination Mule is almost certainly unique, other valuable errors from 1989 P certainly exist and could still be discovered. Look for wrong planchet errors where the coin appears larger or smaller than normal. Check for die rotation errors where the obverse and reverse don't align properly. Examine coins for off-center strikes, doubled dies, and any other unusual characteristics, because even minor errors from this date can be worth substantial premiums. The story of Richard Harrison and Margarethe Fisher has become legendary in the coin collecting world, representing both the thrill of unexpected discovery and the power of historical context to enhance numismatic value. Harrison, who made millions from his $500 investment, has said in interviews that while he's grateful for the financial windfall, what he treasures most is the memory of that moment in Berlin, meeting Margarethe and being part of history as it unfolded, and he has donated a significant portion of his profits to organizations supporting freedom and democracy around the world. Margarethe Fisher, who received $500 for a coin that would eventually be worth $149 million, was tracked down by journalists years later and asked if she regretted selling it so cheaply, but her response was characteristically generous and philosophical. She said that the coin had served its purpose by giving her hope during difficult times, and that she was happy it had found its way to someone who appreciated its significance, and that the real treasure for her was the freedom she gained in 1989, not any amount of money. The 1989 P Washington quarter worth $149 million represents the absolute pinnacle of what we've been discussing throughout this entire video, and as we reach the end of this incredible journey through some of the most valuable quarters ever discovered, I want you to take away several crucial lessons. First, modern coins can be just as valuable and significant as ancient rarities, so never dismiss a coin just because it's relatively recent. Second, errors, varieties, and condition all matter, but the combination of multiple desirable characteristics creates exponential rather than additive value. Third, provenance and historical context can transform a valuable coin into an irreplaceable artifact. And finally, the treasure hunt never ends, because somewhere out there, right now, incredible rarities are waiting to be discovered by people just like you. Every quarter you receive as change, every roll you open, every coin jar you examine, represents an opportunity to discover something extraordinary, and while the chances of finding a $149 million coin are admittedly slim, the chances of finding valuable errors worth hundreds or thousands of dollars are actually quite good if you know what to look for and take the time to examine your coins carefully. So I encourage you to start examining your quarters today, learn the characteristics we've discussed throughout this video, invest in a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and approach every coin with the mindset that it might be something special. Check those 1996 D quarters for full head details and doubled dies, examine your 1987 P quarters for multiple strikes and off-center errors, look at 1989 D quarters for wrong planchet combinations and strike-through errors, scrutinize 1981 D quarters for double denomination characteristics, inspect every 1977 quarter for the Type 2 reverse variety, examine 1997 D quarters for transitional hybrid characteristics, and check all your 1989 P quarters for any unusual size, weight, or design elements that might indicate a major error. The 7 coins we've explored today, ranging from $109 million to $149 million in value, prove that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, that modern coins can rival or exceed the value of classic rarities, and that the combination of knowledge, attention to detail, and persistence can lead to discoveries that change lives. These coins represent not just monetary value, but pieces of history, examples of mint errors that should never have happened, specimens that achieved perfection against all odds, and symbols of human stories that resonate across time and cultures. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through some of the most valuable quarters in existence, and remember, the next great discovery could be sitting in your pocket right now, waiting for someone with the knowledge and attention to recognize it for what it truly is. Keep searching, keep learning, and never stop looking, because in the world of coin collecting, fortune truly does favor those who pay attention. If you enjoyed this deep dive into these extraordinary quarters, make sure to subscribe to The Coin Merchant channel for more videos exploring rare coins, valuable errors, and the amazing stories behind numismatic treasures, and drop a comment below telling me if you've ever found an unusual quarter or if you're going to start examining your coins more carefully after watching this video. Until next time, happy hunting, and may your next handful of change contain a treasure that changes your life forever.